I thought I knew what betrayal felt like until I found my husband's wedding ring hidden in my sister's jewelry box. That moment changed everything I believed about love, family, and trust. The woman I had confided in about our marriage struggles, the sister who held me while I cried about feeling distant from my husband, had been sleeping with him for months. Some wounds cut so deep they reshape your entire understanding of the world. What happened next taught me that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones capable of causing the deepest pain. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. If this resonates with you or someone you know, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories about overcoming life's hardest moments. Trust me, you will want to stay until the end to hear how this all unfolded. My name is Faith, and 3 years ago I believed I was living the American dream. I had a beautiful house in suburban Denver, a successful marketing career, and what I thought was a solid marriage to my college sweetheart Marcus. We had been together for 8 years, married for 5, and while we had our rough patches, like any couple, I genuinely believed we were working through them together. Marcus worked in construction management, often putting in long hours on various projects around the city. I understood the demands of his job and never questioned the late nights or weekend calls. Looking back now, I realize how naive I was, how desperately I wanted to believe in the fairy tale we had built together. My sister Sarah lived just 20 minutes away in downtown Denver. She was 2 years younger than me, single, and working as a freelance graphic designer. We had always been close, talking almost daily, and meeting for coffee or lunch at least twice a week. Sarah was my confidant, the person I turned to when things felt overwhelming or when I needed advice about my marriage. About 6 months before everything fell apart, I started noticing small changes in Marcus's behavior. He became more secretive about his phone, taking it with him to the bathroom and sleeping with it face down on his nightstand. When I asked about his day, his answers became shorter, more vague. He seemed distracted during our conversations, like his mind was somewhere else entirely. At first, I attributed these changes to work stress. Marcus had mentioned several times that his current project was particularly challenging, requiring coordination with multiple contractors and dealing with difficult clients. I tried to be supportive, cooking his favorite meals and giving him space when he seemed overwhelmed. But the distance between us kept growing. Our intimate moments became fewer and farther between. When I tried to talk to him about it, Marcus would brush off my concerns, insisting that everything was fine and that I was overthinking things. He would kiss my forehead and tell me he loved me, but his words felt hollow, like he was reading from a script. I started doubting myself, wondering if I was being paranoid or if there was something wrong with me. Was I not attractive enough anymore? Was I being too needy? These thoughts consumed me, and naturally I turned to Sarah for support and perspective. During our regular coffee dates, I would pour my heart out to her about feeling disconnected from Marcus. Sarah listened patiently, offering comfort and reassurance. She told me that all marriages went through rough patches, and that Marcus probably just needed time to work through whatever was bothering him. Her words were exactly what I needed to hear, and I felt grateful to have such a caring sister. What I did not know was that Sarah was already sleeping with my husband at this point. While I was confessing my fears and insecurities to her, she was secretly meeting Marcus at hotels across the city. Every word of comfort she offered was a lie, every hug a betrayal I could not yet see. The cruel irony of the situation still makes my stomach turn. I was seeking comfort from the very person who was destroying my marriage, and she was pretending to care while stabbing me in the back. Sarah would nod sympathetically when I talked about feeling like Marcus was pulling away, all while knowing exactly where his attention had gone. The first real crack in their deception came on a Tuesday evening in March. I had gotten home early from work and decided to do some spring cleaning, starting with our bedroom. While organizing Marcus's dresser, I found a receipt tucked behind some old papers. It was from an upscale restaurant downtown, dated from the previous Friday, when Marcus had told me he was working late on site. The receipt showed dinner for two with expensive wine and dessert. My heart started racing as I stared at the numbers. This was not a business dinner or a quick meal grabbed between work sites. This was a romantic evening out complete with champagne and chocolate cake. When Marcus came home that night, I confronted him about the receipt. He looked genuinely surprised to see it, as if he had forgotten it existed. After a moment of hesitation, he explained that he had taken an important client out to dinner to discuss a major project. He seemed annoyed that I was questioning him and told me that I needed to trust him more. I wanted to believe him, but something felt off about his explanation. The restaurant was known for intimate dining rather than business meetings, and the items ordered seemed more suited for a romantic date than a professional discussion. I decided to call the restaurant the next day, pretending to be planning a business dinner myself. The hostess was friendly and helpful, describing the restaurant's ambiance as perfect for couples and romantic occasions. When I mentioned that my husband had recently taken a client there, she laughed and said they rarely hosted business dinners because the lighting was too dim and the tables too small for paperwork or presentations. This information hit me like a physical blow. Marcus had lied to my face with such conviction that I almost believed him. If he was lying about dinner, what else was he hiding? I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet, and for the first time I seriously considered the possibility that my husband might be having an affair. Over the next few weeks, I became hyper-aware of Marcus's behavior and schedule. I noticed that his supposed late work nights often coincided with days when Sarah canceled our plans or seemed unavailable. When I called him during these late nights, he would answer after several rings, sounding breathless or distracted. I also noticed changes in his appearance and habits. He started wearing cologne more often and paying more attention to his clothing choices. He would shower immediately after coming home from these late work sessions, which seemed odd if he had just been on a construction site. Most telling was his phone behavior. He had changed his passcode and became visibly anxious whenever I was near it. The second major piece of evidence came when I decided to drive by his supposed work site one evening when he claimed to be there late. The construction site was completely dark and empty, with no sign that anyone had been there for hours. I sat in my car across the street, staring at the empty lot and feeling sick to my stomach. I called Marcus's phone, and when he answered, I could hear restaurant sounds in the background: clinking glasses, muffled conversation, soft music. When I asked where he was, he insisted he was still at the work site, dealing with a problem that had come up. The contradiction between what I could see and what he was telling me was undeniable. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying conversations, analyzing every word and gesture from recent weeks. I started remembering small details that had not seemed significant at the time. How Sarah always seemed to know what Marcus was up to, how she would sometimes smile in a secretive way when I mentioned his name, how she had been unusually interested in our relationship problems. The thought that Sarah might be involved never fully formed in my conscious mind, but somewhere deep down a terrible suspicion was growing. The two people I trusted most in the world were acting strangely, and the timing of their behavior changes seemed too coincidental to ignore. I made the decision to start documenting everything: Marcus's comings and goings, his explanations for being late, any inconsistencies in his stories. I felt like a detective investigating my own life, and the role made me feel dirty and desperate. But I knew I needed evidence before I could confront the situation directly. The truth revealed itself in the most unexpected and devastating way possible. It was a Saturday morning in early April, and Marcus had left early for what he claimed was an emergency call at one of his job sites. I had plans to meet Sarah for our weekly shopping trip, but when I called her apartment, there was no answer. Concerned that she might be sick or that something had happened, I decided to drive over and check on her. Sarah had given me a spare key to her apartment months earlier, insisting that we should be able to look after each other in case of emergencies. I never imagined I would use it under these circumstances. When I arrived at Sarah's building, I noticed Marcus's truck parked in the visitor section. My heart stopped. There had to be an innocent explanation. Maybe he had stopped by to fix something for her, or perhaps there was a family emergency I had not been told about. I tried to convince myself of these possibilities as I climbed the stairs to her second-floor apartment. I used my key quietly, not wanting to startle Sarah if she was sleeping or unwell. The apartment was dim with curtains drawn against the morning sun. I called out softly as I entered, not wanting to wake her unnecessarily. That is when I heard voices coming from her bedroom. Marcus's deep laugh and Sarah's giggle in response. My legs felt like they might give out beneath me as I stood frozen in her living room. Part of me wanted to turn around and leave to preserve the illusion for just a little longer. But I had come too far to turn back now. I needed to see the truth with my own eyes, no matter how much it would hurt. I walked slowly toward the bedroom, each step feeling like it took an eternity. The door was slightly ajar, and through the gap I could see my husband of 5 years lying in bed with my sister. They were intimate and comfortable with each other, laughing about something private between them. Sarah was wearing one of Marcus's work shirts, and he was playing with her hair in a gesture that I recognized as something he used to do with me. The scene was so domestic, so natural, that it was clear this was not a recent development. They had been together long enough to establish routines and inside jokes. Marcus looked more relaxed and happy than I had seen him in months, and Sarah seemed radiant in a way that I had attributed to a new skincare routine or exercise program. I must have made a sound because they both turned toward the door at the same time. The look of shock and horror on their faces was almost comical, if the situation were not destroying my entire world. Marcus scrambled to pull on his pants while Sarah clutched a sheet to her chest, both of them frozen like children caught breaking a valuable vase. For a moment, none of us spoke. The silence was deafening, filled with the weight of 5 years of marriage and 28 years of sisterhood crashing down around us. I felt like I was watching the scene from outside my body, unable to process the magnitude of what I was seeing. Marcus was the first to speak, stammering something about how this was not what it looked like, and how he could explain everything. But his words sounded distant and meaningless. Sarah just stared at me with tears in her eyes, her mouth opening and closing without producing any sound. I found my voice and asked the only question that mattered. How long had this been going on? The silence that followed was answer enough, but eventually Sarah whispered that it had started about 7 months earlier. 7 months. While I had been trying to save my marriage, they had been building a relationship behind my back. The details came out in a painful flood. They had met for coffee one day when Sarah was helping me plan a surprise birthday party for Marcus. One conversation had led to another, and they had connected over shared interests and experiences. What started as innocent friendship had developed into emotional intimacy and eventually a physical affair. The most heartbreaking part was learning that they had genuinely fallen for each other. This was not just physical attraction or a moment of weakness. They believed they were in love. Marcus told me with tears streaming down his face that he had never meant for this to happen, but that he could not deny his feelings for Sarah anymore. Sarah tried to explain that she had never intended to hurt me, that she had fought her feelings for months before giving in to them. She claimed that she had encouraged me to work on my marriage because she hoped Marcus would choose me and that their relationship would end naturally. But her words felt like salt in an already gaping wound. Standing in that bedroom looking at the two people who had betrayed me so completely, I felt something shift inside me. The initial shock and devastation began to transform into something else entirely. A cold, focused anger that gave me clarity I had not experienced in months. I did not scream or cry or beg for explanations. Instead, I told them both to get dressed because we were going to handle this situation like adults. My calm tone seemed to unnerve them more than any emotional outburst would have. They exchanged worried glances as they scrambled to put on clothes, clearly uncertain about what was coming next. Once they were dressed, I asked them to sit down in Sarah's living room while I made some phone calls. My first call was to a lawyer I had worked with on some marketing contracts, asking for a referral to someone who specialized in divorce proceedings. My second call was to my best friend from college, asking if I could stay with her for a few days while I figured things out. Marcus and Sarah watched me make these calls with growing panic. Marcus kept trying to interrupt, insisting that we could work through this and that he was willing to end things with Sarah if I would give him another chance. But his words felt hollow after months of lies and deception. The damage was too extensive to repair. When I finished my calls, I explained exactly how things were going to proceed. I would be filing for divorce immediately, and I expected Marcus to move out of our house within the week. I would not be fighting for possessions or trying to make the process difficult, but I also would not be making it easy for them to continue their relationship without consequences. As for Sarah, I told her that I never wanted to see her again. Our relationship as sisters was over effective immediately. I would not be telling our parents about her involvement in the affair, but I also would not be covering for her if they asked questions about why we were no longer speaking. The most powerful moment came when I stood up to leave, and both of them began pleading with me to reconsider. Marcus grabbed my arm, begging me to think about our 5 years together and not throw it all away over one mistake. Sarah cried and apologized, insisting that she loved me and that they had never meant for me to get hurt. I looked at both of them calmly and told them that they had already thrown away our relationships the moment they chose to betray me. Their regret was not about hurting me. It was about getting caught and facing the consequences of their choices. If they truly cared about my well-being, they would have ended their relationship before it became physical, or they would have been honest with me from the beginning. I left Sarah's apartment feeling strangely liberated. The uncertainty and self-doubt that had plagued me for months was gone, replaced by a clear understanding of reality. I was not crazy or paranoid. My instincts had been correct all along. The problem was not with me or my behavior in the marriage. I had been betrayed by two people who claimed to love me, and now I could start the process of moving forward without them. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into the practical aspects of rebuilding my life. I met with lawyers, organized paperwork, and began the process of separating our shared finances and belongings. Marcus tried repeatedly to contact me, sending long emails and leaving voicemails begging for a chance to explain and apologize. I read and listened to them all, but none of them changed my decision. The divorce proceedings moved quickly since we had no children, and I was not interested in fighting over assets. Marcus kept our house, which had more sentimental value than practical worth anyway. I took my retirement accounts, my car, and enough furniture to start fresh in a new place. The hardest part was dealing with family and friends who did not understand why I was being so definitive about ending the marriage. Many people encouraged me to consider counseling or to take time to cool down before making such a major decision. They could not understand that my decision was not made in anger or haste. It was made from a place of clarity and self-respect. 18 months after I discovered Marcus and Sarah together, I was living in a bright apartment closer to downtown Denver, thriving in a new job at a digital marketing agency, and genuinely happy for the first time in years. The initial pain of betrayal had transformed into something much more valuable, a deep understanding of my own worth and a commitment to never settling for less than I deserved. The healing process was not linear or easy. There were days when I felt overwhelmed by loneliness, and nights when I questioned whether I had been too harsh in cutting both Marcus and Sarah out of my life completely. But every time I wavered, I reminded myself that their betrayal was not a single moment of weakness. It was months of deliberate deception that continued, even as I confided my fears and insecurities to the very person who was causing them. I started therapy about 6 months after the divorce was finalized, not because I was falling apart, but because I wanted to understand how I had missed so many warning signs and how I could trust my instincts better in the future. My therapist helped me see that my willingness to believe the best in people was not a weakness, even though it had been exploited by Marcus and Sarah. Through therapy, I learned that healthy relationships require honesty and transparency as foundational elements. The secrecy and deception in my marriage had been toxic long before I discovered the affair. I had been trying to fix something that was already broken beyond repair, and recognizing this helped me let go of any remaining guilt about my decision to leave. I also reconnected with old friendships that had fallen by the wayside during my marriage. I had not realized how much of my social life had revolved around couple activities with Marcus, and how isolated I had become from my individual support network. Building these relationships again reminded me who I was outside of my role as a wife. My career flourished as I poured energy into work that felt meaningful and challenging. The digital marketing agency appreciated my experience and perspective, and I quickly earned promotions and increased responsibilities. Having my own professional identity and financial independence felt empowering after years of making decisions based on what was best for the marriage rather than what was best for me personally. About a year after my divorce, I learned through mutual friends that Marcus and Sarah were still together and planning to get married. The news did not devastate me the way I might have expected. Instead, I felt a strange sense of closure. They had gotten what they wanted, and I had escaped a marriage built on lies and betrayal. We had all ended up exactly where we belonged. The most important lesson I learned from this experience was that betrayal often reveals the true character of people we thought we knew well. Marcus and Sarah were capable of maintaining elaborate deceptions while looking me in the eye and offering comfort for the very problems they were creating. This realization helped me develop better boundaries and more realistic expectations about human nature. I also learned that my response to betrayal defined me more than the betrayal itself did. I could have chosen to become bitter vengeful or closed off from future relationships. Instead, I chose to use the experience as an opportunity for growth and self-discovery. This choice made all the difference in my ability to move forward with optimism and openness. Today I can honestly say that discovering Marcus's affair with Sarah was one of the most painful and transformative experiences of my life. While I would never wish that kind of betrayal on anyone, I am grateful for the clarity and strength it ultimately provided. I learned that I am capable of surviving devastating loss and rebuilding a life that is more authentic and fulfilling than what I had before. The woman I am now would never tolerate the red flags and dishonesty that I accepted in my marriage with Marcus. I have learned to trust my instincts and to value my own happiness above the comfort of maintaining relationships that do not serve me well. This shift in perspective has made me a better friend, a better professional, and a better human being overall. Most importantly, I learned that forgiveness does not require reconciliation. I have forgiven Marcus and Sarah for their betrayal, not because they deserved it, but because carrying anger and resentment was poisoning my own happiness. However, forgiveness did not mean welcoming them back into my life or pretending that their actions did not have consequences. My story is not unique. Betrayal by loved ones is an unfortunately common human experience. What matters is how we choose to respond when we discover that people we trusted have violated that trust. We can choose to be victims of their poor choices, or we can choose to reclaim our power and build something better from the wreckage they created. I chose empowerment over victimhood, and that choice changed everything. The life I have now is built on honesty, self-respect, and authentic relationships with people who have proven their trustworthiness through their actions, not just their words. It took losing everything I thought I wanted to discover what I actually needed, and for that painful gift, I will always be grateful. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that completely changed your perspective on trust and relationships? I would love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Please hit that like button if this story resonated with you, and subscribe for more real stories about overcoming life's most challenging moments. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that they can survive betrayal and build something beautiful from the ashes of deception. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your worth is not determined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to treat yourself. Until next time, choose courage over comfort, and always trust your instincts.